Welcome 30 to it, everyone. This is another episode of Beyond the Tape. And today we have a very special guest joining us to break down how the 2025 free agency period so far, still some signings, still some names out there that could impact the draft. But with what we've had through this first wave, we're going to break down how this changes the 2025 NFL draft, going team by team and giving you a little bit of a free agency take for each and every squad as well. Maybe even some grades in there. And today I am joined by the awesome Cody Carpentier, NFL draft analyst for Roster Watch and Draft Rankings. So let's welcome Cody to the show. Cody, man, how you doing?
I'm doing fantastic, TJ. I appreciate you having me on. 32 beat writers. Literally, I can never sing the praises enough of how much I appreciate what you guys do, the way you do it, the way you carry yourselves, the way you attack the off season specifically. It's nobody does it better or more real on X. So thank you guys and appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I know you were on last year, but it's great to make this connection and get to work with you today. And man, this is kind of when the offseason gets fun. Like it's always fun because it's hopium season, right? Like everyone has a reason to be excited about their team, whether your team just won 3 games or your team just won the Super Bowl. You have something to look forward to in the offseason. You know, we spend so much time hyping up, okay, I think this guy will sign there, and I think this guy's a good draft fit, but now it's the tangibilization of all those kind of talks and those theories. So we're going to go team by team, breaking down what signing we think most impacts the draft and maybe the draft strategy for that team. Cody, you ready to get started, man?
Let's get after it, man.
Awesome. And also drop in some comments, questions. We're streaming live on X and as well on YouTube. So drop us a like, subscribe, follow us, all that fun stuff. I'll kick us off here with the Arizona Cardinals. I think it was a solid offseason. You re-signed Baron Browning. I think that's a good fit. But sticking at the edge position, I think it's pretty clear to me the one that most impacts the draft is edge. I'm looking at this unit now, man, and it's like hard for me to think of a world where Kenneth Grant, Walter Nolan aren't there potential targets there mid-first round at the 16th overall pick. To me, it was between edge and IDL as like the most likely position they might go. You bring in Josh Sweat now, I'm starting to think it's really interior defensive line. What do you think, Cody?
Yeah, when I think Arizona is interesting because they have some interesting needs. I didn't think that they would probably go out and spend the most on Josh Sweat, but I can't lie, I kind of like the fit. The direction, I think, as far as what I took away from this, and I look at the NFL draft, it is that the edge thing, where the one thing we know about this class is, and if people don't know, it's very strong on defensive line and edge. And the Cardinals have enough picks. They got picks 16, 47, 78 in the top 100. And that's enough to go out and get your defensive lineman or something. But I think the way Monty Ossenfort, who is one of my favorite GMs in the league, attacks this is getting pieces at each position so that you don't hamstring yourself in the draft. And Josh Sweat, 4 years, $76 million. I think it's a good get, because Sweat at one time was, a 5-star top end recruit in the country. So I like the Sweat move here, and I think that that's a key give that they're probably not going to go that direction the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's kind of what you're talking about. Like these teams, I think, are putting good band-aids on the roster through free agency. Even a signing like a Zay Jones and an Evan Brown, right? Like you could see this team kind of going guard somewhere in the top 100, but just in case the board doesn't fall their way, they have a guy who could potentially step in there, and you're okay enough with him starting potentially week 1. So I do agree with that. I think that's something that Monty Ossenforth's done well. I think we see a lot of different GMs do that at a high level. Josh Sweat, to me, definitely the most impact signing. I do also want to point out Dalvin Tomlinson. I know I'm talking interior defensive line, but Dalvin Tomlinson's kind of become this guy where, like, if you sign him, odds are you're kind of targeting and kind of eventually replace him. So I think that's ultimately kind of the writing on the wall there for Arizona. We are using the PFF free agency tracker, by the way, so we don't know the guarantees here on this. And that's the other tricky part about free agency sometimes is like the Von Miller deal a handful of years ago. 6 years, holy cow, Von Miller got all this money. It's really a 3-year deal. And that's ultimately kind of how it played out too. So did want to make note of that as well as we're getting started. Well, Cody, I want to toss it to you. What is the most impactful signing in regards to the NFL draft made by the Atlanta Falcons?
Boy, these Falcons, year in and year out, it's just like I can't guess what they're going to do, what direction they're going to go, if they're going to spend, if they're not going to spend, if they're going to draft correctly or not. They got 4 picks in this draft right now, 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 7th. And they go out and it's like 1- and 2-year deals for guys that are Leonard Floyd, right, is a guy that kind of hit that apex, never really hit what he should have been coming out. Mike Ford, Mike Hughes, 2 underwhelming cornerbacks. Hughes, formerly a first-round pick to the Minnesota Vikings. Divine Diablo, I think, is an interesting one. Very athletic, kind of I don't know what you call him, like a hybrid safety linebacker type that I was a big
Linebacker.
fan of in Las Vegas. And I got a family member that's a big Raider fan, and he was mad that they lost Diablo. So good, but not great. I still think you look at the loss of Grady Jarrett as that's 100% going to be a need in this defense. And they re-signed Taquan Graham, but that's not enough for me. I'm circling defensive line for the Atlanta Falcons. And, that's as far as this goes, like my big takeaway from the Falcons is they're going D-line in the first round.
Well, I mean, you look at Jeff Ulbrich coming from New York, used to having Quinnen Williams right in the middle of that. Raheem Morris, before he was the head coach in Atlanta, the DC in Los Angeles, where they had, the best defensive player, in my opinion, of our generation in Aaron Donald. So I agree. And I mean, Grady Jarrett's a great football player, but I think they made the right choice there. He's just getting up there in age. The price point just wasn't going to work out. But now you're in an interesting spot right there in the middle of the first round where the edge value's going to be good. And there's also a lot of really good interior defensive players too. So I think this really comes down to how do you feel about Braylon Trice, missed all of last year with the injury, 3rd round pick. And then Ruka Rororo, Brandon Dorless. Where are you at on those guys? If they feel like they can play, maybe that sends them in the edge direction. If not, maybe they do attack interior defensive line. I think that's a great shout. I also think the corners, really, my takeaway here is there's none of these guys that stop you from drafting best player available. If Jahdae Barron is your BPA and he's available at 15, make the pick. Mike Ford is not stopping you. Mike Hughes is not going to stop you. Or if your highest graded player is James Pierce Jr., Leonard Floyd's not going to stop you there either. So I think the options are pretty wide open here for the Falcons. But I do think interior defensive line, that's a really good shout as well. Let's jump over to the Ravens. This one's pretty easy for me. DeAndre Hopkins is like the type of receiver that I've been saying, like, if the Ravens could just get, like, to steal a term from Matt Harmon, like the sacrificial X, if I can keep Rashad Bateman and Zay Flowers away from press coverage, it's a win in my books. And I think DeAndre Hopkins, case in point, is that sacrificial X. Let him take on the press coverage. He'll win you a couple of 50-50 balls. He can make some of those contested grabs over the middle of the field as well. So he just diversifies the portfolio of that offense just enough, while also freeing up Bateman and Zay Flowers to be the best version of themselves, in my opinion. Cody, what do you think?
Their biggest offseason, like, must do was to re-sign Ronnie Stanley, and they did it. They got him back. There was murmurs that he wasn't going to be back in Baltimore, and that would have obviously opened up a wide open hole for the draft. They get Ronnie Stanley back, and then this Hopkins thing, you bring him up. I know it's $5 million, and like if you look at the landscape of free agency this year, the receivers are getting anywhere from 2 to like feels like 6.5. Like, and then if you're the next tier up, if you're, I guess Darius Slayton's getting like 10 million, 12 million now with De'Ami Brown. That is what it is. But I think Hopkins getting 5 is interesting. And I agree with you in the sense that it should allow the main coverage to kind of move towards Hopkins or get that X coverage, allow Zay and Bateman and these tight ends to kind of get more open. But we didn't get the DeAndre Hopkins that we're used to this past year. Definitely. And I love DeAndre Hopkins as much as anybody. And I'm very much just going to be riding the fence with this Hopkins thing. And, for fantasy football purposes, I'm not even going to touch it, but I think it will assist these other guys like Bateman and Zay Flowers to continue to grow. Also, just having a guy like Hopkins in that locker room for both of those guys, the maturation of Zay Flowers, the maturation of Bateman. But as far as like this free agent class this is Baltimore right here. Like if they don't have a clear hole, they're not going to go out and spend big on it and go get a Derrick Henry or something. So I like where Baltimore's at. DeCosta is one of the best GMs in all the league.
And even you look at the Stanley contract, it's not as expensive as you might have thought for a franchise left tackle. Now he's got injury history and stuff like that, and he's on the wrong side of 30. But what he does for that offensive line when he's there is immense. And also want to note Josh Jones, I think he signed with Seattle. So like you kind of lost that potential, bridge as a potential next left tackle there as well. So bringing back Stanley was definitely huge. I think that's a great shout. The other thing when it comes to the draft, cutting Marcus Williams is pretty big to me. I think if Malachi Starks makes it to them, it's going to be hard to pass on that because that's the true free safety you're looking at. Move Kyle Hamilton back to the nickel, move Marlon Humphrey out wide. So just something to keep your eyes on there for the Ravens, or you just get 2 monsters at safety. Let Kyle Hamilton do his thing and get Nick Emmanwori in there. I'm not the world's biggest Nick Emmanwori fan, but like, it's hard to deny the fun you could have with those 2 chess pieces there.
That's I literally my mock dropped today over at Roster Watch, and I put Emmanwori there, and I did it just because I was like, I may not love it, but I'll tell you what I do love is I just love the idea of Kyle Hamilton and Nick Emmanwori just roaming back there. It's like, it doesn't even matter.
And that's where like making these mock drafts, we're not doing it for one specific team. So we don't have like one specific scheme in mind. And sometimes when you do that, you're like, dude, the amount of mismatches you could create and the amount of chaos you could create for an offense with those two both being on the field at the same time, it's immense. So I would love to see if that's the direction they went. But I feel like that's one that's more fun for us than necessarily for NFL teams. But let's get to the Buffalo Bills. What do you think here? Most impactful signing for the Bills?
They got a lot. I mean, they signed a lot of guys. Maybe the most interesting one was Darrington Evans, which I was like,
sure,
what? The first 2 days of early tampering, you signed Darrington Evans. Biggest play here, if it hits, I think is Larry Ogunjobi, defensive lineman, formerly of Cleveland. He bounced around in Pittsburgh. He's been in the league for feels like about a decade now. But they've been trying to get a guy into this role. Obviously, the Joey Bosa signing is going to take a lot of the limelight. He gets $12.5 million after he gets cut from the Chargers, and he kind of fits into that Von Miller role that they've also been trying to fill. But I think Ogunjobi adds good depth behind an Ed Oliver, behind next to a Daquan Jones in this room where they've drafted guys the last couple of years. Zion Logue from Georgia last year. I think it was Dwayne Carter from Duke. I like Dwayne Carter, but he's a 4th round pick. And it's the Bills are making plays for guys like Ogunjobi, Bosa, Palmer. I think that these are not, I don't want to say all in moves, but they're like, hey, we need to quit with the like rookie late round depth pieces. We need to get the veterans that we know can play football in December depth pieces.
It's one of those things where it's got to be tough as a GM. Like, I want this guy because in 3 years' time, he might be the better player. But when push comes to shove, you got to get guys to help you win games now. And that's been like the hump that Buffalo's kind of had a hard time getting over. So as a Steelers fan, Ogunjobi, I think it was like wise for us to release him. But if at the same point, it's good pickup here for Buffalo. Like, now you're not forcing yourself to go defensive interior there in the back half of the first round. Same thing with the Joey Bosa ad. If you don't love the edge value there, which might be a little hard to believe, but maybe there's so many guys off the board that they're like, we don't really love this spot here late first round. So I like both those ads. It helps them win this upcoming season. Also brings that veteran presence. And if Bosa can stay healthy, can they get this guy in bubble wrap until January? Because if so, then I think he might be well worth the $12.6 million. I think Josh Palmer might be the one I'm most interested in here. You know, kind of like the DeAndre Hopkins conversation. Amari Cooper wasn't Amari Cooper last year, obviously, for Buffalo. Had some moments maybe early on when he got there, but it just wasn't necessarily what they thought. But I do think Keon Coleman played better when he wasn't the X. So I almost do wonder if Josh Palmer comes in and it's another one of these DeAndre Hopkins things where it's like, just let him play X. Just let him deal with press coverage. Let him play that role. Let's move Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir. You know, Shakir's going to play the slot. Same thing with Dalton Kincaid. But let's move Keon Coleman off the line of scrimmage and see how much that frees him up. So I almost wonder if the Palmer signing makes everyone else better in the aggregate. And he himself is like a solid player too. So I'm kind of looking at that. And when you bring in Palmer too, like receiver wasn't the most pressing need for this team, but are they going to draft it in the top 100? Kind of feels like they would have to have that right specific guy in mind. And maybe someone like a Trey Harris or someone like that, bigger body. Like, I don't know, but I don't feel like they need to force it now.
I don't feel like they need to force it. And I think it's interesting because Coleman would be the guy that I could say, like, of this whole receiving room, he projects to potentially be the, you know, an X, an alpha type of a player. Definitely got the mentals to do that. Palmer is interesting to me because it's like, I didn't quite think he was going to get 12 million. I thought he was going to be more of like a, 7-8 type of a guy. But they do have 2 second round picks, 52 and 62. They got the Vikings second round pick from last year. So that's kind of good. Like you said, Trey Harris area, like that's Jaden Higgins, potentially Jalen Noel, guys like this. But it's like also even that kind of the same ilk of like this just Shakir's and Josh Palmer. Like, I don't know. I think it's fine, but it's still, I would still love to have a true alpha attached to Josh Allen. And I know that's maybe a slight to Stephon Diggs, but it's not meant to be.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where maybe they do get interesting and package 1662, and that's how they climb up the board in the second round to get an Ayoman or a Higgins or someone like that to be that true X. That would be really interesting. I might have to explore that in one of my mocks upcoming. All right, Carolina Panthers, most impactful move for the NFL draft. I don't really know if there is one here. Trevon Merrick's like the signing that most excites me, but I can't lie to you, I haven't done a whole lot of mocks with the Panthers taking safety, and maybe that's on me. But it does kind of take that off being a potential position of need. Obviously, they were big on Milton Williams, and then New England kind of scooped him up at the last possible moment. So I think a solid pivot. I don't love Treshaun Wharton. I think he kind of gets benefits from playing alongside Chris Jones, but at the same time, they need to overhaul that entire defensive line. So if it takes $18 million, then so be it. Wharton plus Bobby Brown, the third, who I think is a solid player too. I think those are probably the two moves where I'm like, all right, that brings some stability. I don't think Mason Graham falls to them anyways. And I feel like these signings kind of help alleviate that because it's probably just not going to happen. He feels like he's going to go at 5 to Jacksonville at this point. So I like those two moves maybe as the ones that most stand out to me NFL draft-wise. What do you think?
I kind of agree with you, and like there's nothing that really pops out. The boring answer, it's going to be kind of lame. I'm going to say Rico Dowdle. I know it's $3 million bucks, 1 year, $3 million. I think it's interesting because they paid Chuba Hubbard last year. Jonathan Brooks is projecting to not play the entire season. They cut Miles Sanders, who's now a Cowboy, and Amani Bailey's on the roster, but Amani Bailey's not going to be in the conversation. So it's Chuba and Rico going into the season, and if there's no Rico signed and you go into the draft without a veteran back next to Chuba, I think you probably use a earlier pick on a running back. And in this class, they pick 4 times in the top 110. You're probably using like 74 or 110 on a back. Now with a Rico, I think you can push that, kick the can down, and see what happens in the Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt territory in like the 6th, 7th round for a guy that you can I know he can be a good football player. He can be my third back. We can bring this guy along slowly rather than have to use an earlier pick. You can focus those earlier picks where they definitely need to use them, like linebacker edge with like the Jalen Walker, which is the big rumor right now, and corner and interior offensive line, things like this.
Yeah, and Jalen Walker is the guy who I just can't help but find myself mocking. He's top 6 player on my big board, so I'm a big Jalen Walker guy. So and that's kind of where, again, Mason Graham's probably not falling to this team. If he did, there could be a conversation had Graham versus Walker. I'd probably lean Graham there, but all that said, they've done their due diligence on the interior. Now I'm kind of feeling like, Jalen Walker kind of freed up to be the guy there. To the Chicago Bears, man. Cody, I don't know if you wanted to throw out a potential overall winner of free agency so far, but I think the Bears have to be in that conversation. Most impactful move, I think I'll go with the Joe Thuney trade. One, just because he's, out of those 3, he's probably the best right now. And also it's a future draft pick too. So from that standpoint, it doesn't really affect this year's draft other than the fact that it's probably not a position the Bears are going to draft super highly, but it's what they needed. And, Ben Johnson coming from Detroit, having that offensive line be an absolute pillar of a strength. Now we're trying to do the same thing with Chicago. The Grady Jarrett signing interests me, Dayo Odedengbo, and of course, Dahlman. You could certainly put him as like my honorable mention, but I think Joe Thuney right now is probably the signing that I think to me most impacts the draft of the Bears. What do you think, Cody?
I kind of just want to take the lazy way out of this one and just lump in all these offensive linemen. I want to lump in Dahlman, Thuney, and Jackson and just go, you win. And here's the scary thing. You bring it up like they're the winners so far, 100%. That's kind of scary because every year that's kind of like this. You don't want to be the team that spends the most money. You don't want to be the team labeled truthfully the big winner because then you carry this big thing and everyone thinks back to the dream team from the Eagles, back in the Nnamdi Asomugha days. So I think the Bears are doing it the right way. You're building on the inside, which is what they need to do. You can't just walk into a draft and be like, yep, we're going to draft a center and 2 guards and a tackle, and we're going to rebuild this thing. No, you needed to go out and you needed to spend that cash, get some protection for your quarterback. I agree with you on those guys. I'll pivot though. I'll just say Grady Jarrett. They botched this thing a year ago. Should have drafted Byron Murphy. Should have been on that defensive line. He's in Seattle now from Texas. He should have been the guy there. Grady Jarrett, he's on his back 9, but they get him for a 3-year deal here. I like the numbers. 3 for 43 for Grady Jarrett. I think he can still play some good football, some leadership football on the interior defensive line. And hopefully they bring in another defensive lineman or edge rusher, and they continue to add that side of the ball because this is what Chicago needs. They have the weaponry, right? Yeah. And I know there's a lot of conversation around Ashton Jeanty miss me with the Ashton Jeanty. You need to go and get yourself like a Kelvin Banks or get yourself one of these defensive linemen at 10 and continue to build those trenches because that's the only way you're going to win the NFC North, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. Also, this is a team trying to win now. So when it comes to like drafting those spots versus getting known commodities and Jonah Jackson, Drew Dahlman, and Joe Thuney, I think if you want to win now, you can't guarantee that with draft picks. Sometimes it takes till year 3 or 4. So I also think from that standpoint, that helps out Ben Johnson. And I'm loving the Byron Murphy. He was my top defensive player in last year's class, and he is the exact 3-tech that Matt Eberflus normally like covets and needs in his defense. And what could have been otherwise, but he's still working the league. He's just not a head coach, obviously. But I'm with you there. I think Grady Jarrett is actually a really interesting signing for this team. And at 10, I just don't think Jeanty's going to get there. I'm kind of having a hard time seeing him get past the Raiders. But even if he does, let's just say he does get the 10. That said, yeah, whether if it's Josh Simmons, who's your OT1, if it's Kelvin Banks, if it's Will Campbell, and you still think the wingspan's going to work, or if it's Shamar Stewart or someone like that, I think that's still the direction I would lean. Go trenches with one of those picks with that pick, and then at 39, go get Quinshon Judkins, Caleb Johnson, somewhere in that range. Go get your running back. So I'm with you wholeheartedly. All right, Cody, break it down. The Cincinnati Bengals. I mean, this is a team that I feel like, from a team building standpoint, they've been under the microscope for 2 to 3 years now. And obviously T. Higgins kind of at the center of all that. But let me know, what do you think is the most impactful move here for Cincinnati that impacts the draft? I have a feeling it might be bringing back T. Higgins.
I was going to say, like, the two signings that they have, Oren Burks and TJ Slayton, do nothing for me other than be depth pieces. And they re-signed a bunch of guys, but T. Higgins is the one. And now I know they're getting a lot of backlash because they said they were going to make him like the highest paid non-quarterback or whatever. And they wanted to assure that Chase and Higgins were going to be there for the future. And he's just tagged right now, and nothing's official as far as like a long-term contract. But I'll give him credit for now. They got him with a franchise tag. We'll see what happens. That's the biggest thing here. If they lost T. Higgins, that becomes your glaring hole, because as much as they do like Andrei Iosivas and Charlie Jones, like those guys, Iosivas could fit into that role, but he's going to be much closer to like the Tyler Boyd output level than he is a T. Higgins, and the help that Higgins gives being on the opposite side of Jamar Chase. So I think that just T. Higgins by himself, that's the answer.
Yeah, I got to agree wholeheartedly with you here. And, talking about making him the highest paid, whether it's going to be Chase or Higgins who gets that, highest paid non-quarterback, it doesn't help when your division rival decides to make Myles Garrett, a $40 million a year guy. So the Browns continuing to throw wrenches in the side of the AFC North because, of course, the fully guaranteed contract for Watson, that was something that pissed off the Ravens too. So, the Browns continue to make mortal enemies inside their division, which, speaking of the Cleveland Browns, that's who we have up next. Most impactful signing and what it does for the NFL draft. I mean, the extension of Myles Garrett feels like the one to go with here. They could still go Abdul Carter at 2 if they don't love the quarterbacks. That would be a nasty 1-2 punch. And for a team that, could you win a race to 20 with Kirk Cousins if he gets released, or Russell Wilson with that pass rush? I think you could. Yeah, honestly, I think it's got to be Myles Garrett. One, this team just hasn't done that much. I don't think Cornelius Lucas is moving the needle that much. Malik Collins probably not changing a whole lot. Maybe Joe Tryon-Trank is like a buy low prospect, but I'll go with keeping Myles Garrett. He's the best defensive player in the league right now, in my opinion. So keep your guy. And also, like, from a jersey sales standpoint, come on, we got to think about the minds of the owners here. If Myles Garrett wasn't on that team, who is selling jerseys in Cleveland? That's the question I'll leave to you, Cody. What's the most impactful signing for the Browns?
The answer to that is crickets. Actually, like there's nothing. It's the most bought jersey in that town would be the one where you just keep adding a name to the bottom.
Yeah, the quarterback name.
So that's where I go. I think you nailed this one. It's 100,000% Myles Garrett, only because that establishes that you're still continuing to try and win. If you get rid of Myles Garrett, you're pretty much at the point where you're like, all right, well, let's just get rid of everything that we have that's worth anything, and let's just restart this thing. Joe Tryon's interesting. I liked Tryon a couple years ago, but I think Tampa just continues to add pieces to this defensive line year after year after year. And Tryon just kind of was like, all right, well, you just kind of, I guess, not fizzled out, but just kind of like got through the system and was like, all right, now it's time to move on. And so I think Tryon's fine behind Myles Garrett. And I think that the idea of adding Abdul Carter on the opposite side of Myles Garrett and just seeing what falls to you, for a quarterback or running back or these other positions in round 2 and round 3 is 100% the move. And establishing a true pass rush, with the highest paid non-quarterback and with Abdul Carter it's pretty maniacal, to be honest.
Totally agree. You know what else we could throw in there? How about the restructure of Deshaun Watson and how that moves money into the future? Like, that's not really a guy I would want to be tied to, and now you're making it even harder to move on from him. So that's a curious strategy right there for the Cleveland Browns. We'll see how that plays out for them long term. All right, Dallas Cowboys. I mean, you hit on the Miles Sanders. So, Cody, I give it to you. What's the most impactful move maybe by Dallas? Is it Miles Sanders, or something tells me you're going to go somewhere else here?
Yeah, I'm not going to go towards that Miles Sanders thing. The Javonte, we'll just lump it in. Javonte, Miles Sanders.
There you go.
I'll take the bait with the running backs because I think it's a flag that says we're not going Ashton Genty. And you said you believe he doesn't make it there because of the Raiders. I think the Saints are in the options. I think the Bears obviously are getting conversed. let's say he makes to 12, they're not taking him at 12. I fully believe that is the direction they went here. Adding a Javonte, adding a Miles Sanders, and you might not even see the Cowboys take it back in the second round. They may just kick this can to the third, fourth round and maybe get like an Ollie Gordon, a guy from the Big 12, a guy from down south. So I think that's the direction I would go and saying that the Cowboys don't make a lot of good moves, but I think that a proper move was to spend less than $5 million on these two running backs and then take one of the running backs in this rookie class later and allow them to kind of grow into the role during the season.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'll go with Osa Odighizuwa in that extension they gave him. It's a good amount of money, but it's right around that Justin Madubuike number, and you see what Milton Williams end up getting. So I think 20, you can swallow that pill. I also kind of thought if they didn't bring back Osa, could that be a Walter Nolan kind of spot? Again, talking 3-techs, Matt Eberflus, what does he want at that kind of cornerstone piece of his D-line? See over Walter Nolan's that guy or someone else in this draft class. But you bring back Odighizuwa, and that kind of tells me, okay, cool. And that's when you talk about running back with Dallas. Is it fun to think about Nash and GNT at 12? Of course it is. But this team has way more holes than you think at running back. And to that point, do you want to let Osa Odighizuwa go and then open up another hole in this roster that has plenty of work to be done on it? I don't think you do. And I think they got him back at a decent price point too. So like the player, he's ascending, not a bad contract. And it's just one of these things where you have too many holes to fill. Don't put another, opening there in the boat and continue to sink the ship. Denver Broncos, most impactful signing. I feel like I'd be crazy not to say Evan Ingram just because how many mock drafts have you seen with the Broncos taking a tight end? It feels like a majority of them. But I also love the two 49er guys they brought over too. Hufanga is absolutely an upgrade over their box safety from last year. I think Brandon Jones had a good year. PJ Locke, not so much. And Dre Greenlaw's an interesting player too. And when he's healthy, a very good player. But I feel like I got to go Evan Ingram just from a draft standpoint. I don't think this prevents you from drafting one. I mean, look at the Jags. They bring in Evan Ingram. They draft Brenton Strange. And we see that succession plan already playing out. So you still could go a guy. It's just probably not going to be a first rounder at this point in my eyes. Cody, what do you think?
I'm just going to say everybody. They don't take a running back. That's my thing. They don't sign a running back. They let Javonte walk. I asked Sean Payton at the Combine about the backfield, about McLaughlin, about Blake Watson, about our guy Audric Estime, and he kind of just lumped them all together and was like, "Oh yeah, and you can add in Tyler Beatty." And I was like, "Okay, well, I know where your brain is on these guys." And he makes the move for Evan Ingram. That tells me no Colston Loveland, right? Sherfield's contract is what it is. It's $4 million. It's borderline DeAndre Hopkins money, if we're being honest with ourselves. Dre Greenlaw, Hufanga are good additions, but no running back focus here.
Yeah.
Points me towards round one. Broncos are going running back. And I've had this conversation with my guy, Alex Dunlap from Roster Watch, about this term joker, right? Sean Payton's thrown this thing joker around. And joker to me has been just like an overall guy that can do everything, guy that can do anything. And Taysom Hill obviously is the first one that everyone has that comes to mind. A tight end type, a guy that can line up at H-back, right? Line up at running back, line up at tight end, line up out wide, line up in the slot, all these different things. But where my brain goes, and was kind of the two players I had in mind to begin with, was Colston Loveland, and then it was Trey Henderson from Ohio State, the running back, because he best pass protector in the class of running back position. He catches the ball in the backfield, super dynamic. He can run the football. He can do everything. And that's kind of where my brain goes from the Joker perspective when they do sign an Evan Ingram. So that's what I think the door opens up for. So I would say, I guess all of them being not running backs or Evan Ingram being the one that they did sign kind of gives us some clarity for the draft.
No, I think that's a great shout. And also like Amari and Hampton, I'll throw that in the mix. It just comes down to you want to do it round one or round two. I think Henderson is probably going to make it to him in the second round. Maybe you move up slightly to go make that happen. But I mean, you got to think this is the guy who worked with Reggie Bush. And it's kind of fun to think about, what if he got, like a Trey Henderson in that offense? What would that look like? I also think Hampton brings a lot of those same qualities, just in a bigger body. But that downhill running style, good pass protector, good pass catcher, that could be another one. What do you think about Luther Burden, though? Not seeing him in a whole lot of first-round mocks nowadays, but could he be that yards after the catch, mismatch type of guy? It's that receiver versus running back and tight end like we've been talking about, but give me your thoughts on that as a possibility.
I love Luther Burden, man. Luther Burden was my wide receiver one until literally last week. I finally bit the bullet, and I the reason I moved him down a spot was literally just because his hands, this is going to sound stupid, but his hands are 8 5/8 inches. And when you look at the historical numbers,
Yeah.
There's like the bottom 30 guys with sub 9-inch hands at receiver, which again, people are like, well, I thought that was a quarterback deal. It's a quarterback deal for sure. But at running back or at receivers that kind of fit Luther Burden's archetype, which is, 190 to 205 pounds, 5'10 to, 6 foot. He's got the second smallest hands next to Colston Listenby, who was drafted like a decade ago, didn't hit. George Pickens has like a 1/4 inch hands bigger. He was the one guy in the bottom 25 that hit. And it's one of those things, TJ, that I'm like, I love everything about Luther Burden. And people have been hating on him because of this past year. They're like, what happened? What happened? Well, Brady Cook happened. Let's be honest with ourselves here.
Yeah.
And Luther Burden's an excellent receiver. I would love to see Luther Burden in Denver. 100%.
His yards after catch ability. And I also think like slot fades, this guy can stretch the field down, or he can stretch the field and push safeties back too. So I think he kind of serves two purposes there. And then you kind of talked about the hand size. That is a bit of a concern for me. And the guy I'm about to talk about is a couple inches taller, but around the same weight and actually has bigger hands. The real concern for Burden is that he turns into a Laviska Shenault type, where it just doesn't really come together. And dude, I think Shenault was my receiver 5 or 6 that year. Like, trust me, I was big on Laviska Shenault, mismatch weapon. How could you not love him? That being said, I think we've come a long way in regards to offensive schemes. I think these play callers have gotten so much better at how to maximize someone like a Laviska Shenault or a Luther Burden. That being said, still waiting for the breakout for Laviska Shenault. Maybe we're not wrong. We're just early. But that would be the concern there. And Burden's actually got smaller hands. So that's a bit of a concern for me. But I'm still hoping for the best. And I do think the fit with Denver is interesting. Detroit Lions, most impactful signing, most changes the draft. That's, I feel like I got to go DJ Reed. That's just like the best signing they made. But they also drafted 2 corners with their first 2 picks last year. So I don't know if that was going to be something they addressed within the first 64 picks. Really, you bring back Marcus Davenport. Here's where I'll go with this. Marcus Davenport doesn't stop you for trading for Trey Hendrickson. If you can give up a 2 and a 5 for Trey Hendrickson, go make it happen. I think it's between the Lions and the Commanders. And I feel like they're probably running each other's offer up a little bit. So we'll see. But I just don't think that Davenport stops you from making that trade. So maybe that's my most impactful signing. They didn't go out there. They didn't feel the need to go and make a huge splash at edge. I wonder if they're buzzing the line right now to Cincinnati to see if they can get Hendrickson there. What do you think, Cody?
It wouldn't surprise me. I know everyone wanted to fantasize about the Max Crosby thing, but I don't think that was ever going to happen. The Hendrickson thing, I'll buy into that. I'll buy some stock into the Hendrickson thing. Marcus Davenport, that is one of the players that we'll always look back on. You get to a certain point, you go, yeah, that guy, if he would have ever been healthy, we could have really had something. But he's just going to continue to hang around, and maybe he'll have a season like, Zach Bond last year. Zach Bond just all of a sudden it hits, and you're like, okay, well, he's in Defensive Player of the Year conversation. That's in the range of outcomes for a Marcus Davenport type. So I like that for the re-signing. I guess none of the other moves. DJ Reed, you're probably right. I'll give you the DJ Reed one. That's probably the answer.
And it's really just because now they have like a floor. They have a safety net at that position. If Rakestraw and Arnold basically battle for that other starting spot, okay. As long as one of them you feel confident as a starter next year, you're feeling okay about that. Brian Branch back in the nickel. You also still have Amik Robertson kind of floating in there as a depth piece too. So yeah, I feel like DJ Reed just kind of solidifies that barring injury, they probably won't lose because of, safety or corner depth once again. Cody, man, I don't envy you here. What's the most impactful signing for the Green Bay Packers? Or, you know what? Honestly, it's probably easier to say, like, what move did they not make and how does that impact the NFL draft? Because that's maybe what we have more to work with here.
Yeah, they had 2 bigger contracts, Nate Hobbs and Aaron Banks. The Banks thing. So this last mock I just did, which literally came out today, I still gave them Josh Simmons, the tackle from Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Rashad Walker's there at left right now, plugged into the depth chart. 7th round pick a couple years ago from Penn State. He showed he can play football. I just think you continue to try to upgrade that thing. Yeah. So I'll go tackle. I'll just say they haven't added a tackle. It's kind of hard to add a tackle. Everybody knows that in free agency. So they add a guard. They show that they're willing to upgrade the trenches. They get Nate Hobbs. Nate Hobbs is also interesting because one thing I do know, it's been a couple years, but for like a decade straight, it felt like every single year the Packers were drafting a safety or a corner in the draft, and I wouldn't put them past them to do that again if Malachi Starks makes it there to 23, which I think he will. But I'll just go with that. They didn't take a tackle.
Yeah, that's what I did in one of my most recent mocks. I like that a ton. Corners kind of, I feel like I've always shoehorned myself into drafting corner. I don't think Jai Alexander is going to be there next year. But there's also enough corner depth in this class to probably do that in round two. And still some guys out there on the free agent market that you could probably use as patch starters. Really, the Nate Hobbs thing, what interests me there is Javon Bullard, I thought was a promising slot player for them long term. He could also play box safety, but Evan Williams was a great strong safety for them last year. So I'm kind of wondering how these puzzle pieces come together. I'll trust Jeff Hafley. I think he is a good defensive mind. The Banks move was probably a little rich for my blood. But if you're telling me, yeah, get Josh Simmons, get Josh Connerly, plug him in next to Aaron Banks, I can then look at this as saying, hey, they thought that left side of the offensive line wasn't cutting it. That's why they did that. And to your point about Rasheed Walker, I say this all the time about Braxton Jones too. Anytime you have to say the guy's draft round, right? Like Braxton Jones, good for a 5th rounder. Rasheed Walker, good for a 7th rounder. How good are they? You know, like I feel like if you have to build in that caveat, do you really want them starting? My answer would probably be no. So Simmons, Connerly, maybe Kelvin Banks slips down a little bit far. I think that's definitely a prime target there for Green Bay. And then maybe corner outside guy, maybe on round 2 or something like that. Then we get to the Houston Texans. Man, this is another one where, honestly, I think the easier, most impactful move for the NFL draft, it's the Laramie Tunsil trade. Like, that's just kind of where we have to start. I mean, you bring in Laken Tomlinson. Everyone knows this team needs to get better in the trenches, both offensive line, I think defensive interior. But there's just not a whole lot of needle-moving moves. And if anything, the Laramie Tunsil trade kind of moves the needle in the opposite direction. I know I saw the reports out there that, maybe he wasn't the right leader for an offensive line that probably needs a guy to kind of step up and, be a mentor to some of those other guys. So I get it from a locker room standpoint, but you just moved on from one of the best pass protectors at that position in the NFL, and it was already a group of weakness. So now this feels like a team that it'd be nice to give them the Emeka Egbuka. It'd be nice to give them Derek Harmon or something like that, but Josh Simmons, Josh Connerly, Kelvin Banks, can they move up and get him? It feels like they're kind of shoehorned in to go and tackle here. But what do you think? Most impactful move for the Texans?
It seems like they're trying to reshape this entire offensive line. I think you're right. And I listened to quite a bit of Texas radio, Houston local radio, and they always talk about Tunsil. They always talk about Kenyon Green, why this offensive line stinks this last year. The Tunsil thing was never about the talent. It was about, I guess, again, not my thoughts here. This was, allegedly he's a locker room, a little bit of a case in the locker room, is what it is. He moves on to Washington. The note that I thought was most interesting, and I don't really know how to read into this, so this is how I'm going to answer this, is they've tried to pseudo reshape this offensive line by adding Laken Tomlinson and Ed Ingram from Minnesota, and Tomlinson was, he's bounced around a couple of times now. It doesn't matter.
Jets last or Seattle? Was he in Seattle last year? I think he was in Seattle.
I thought he was in Seattle. I was going to say, but I know he's been on like 3 teams. It feels like they released Shaq Mason, traded Kenyon Green, traded Laramie Tunsil, and my favorite tweet from this whole weekend. And I'm going to give credit to Nate Tice here. He put this tweet out, and holy cow, that's hammered it. Perfect. The Texans jettisoned the guard that allowed the 3rd highest one-on-one pressure rate among all guards last year, Kenyon Green, and have now acquired the guards that ranked 1st and 4th, Ed Ingram and Laken Tomlinson. So they went from the 3rd highest one-on-one pressure rate allowed, and they acquired the 1st, the most highest pressure rate allowed at the guard position, and the 4th. So did they get better? I don't even know, because I'm from Minnesota, and I talk to my brother a lot. He's from Minnesota. He's 15-year-old kid that is brutally honest with you, and he likes Ed Ingram because he's met him. He's got his autograph, but he goes, Ed Ingram sucks. And I was like, dude, listen, bro, listen.
Yeah, it hasn't worked out.
They traded him. He's like, good. I was like, Houston, I don't know what you're doing, but you definitely need to draft offensive line in round 1.
Round 1. Probably again in round 3, Tate Ratledge, right? Like
4.
it's gonna be it's almost the opposite of what we talked about with the Bears, right? Like you want to win now, so you get these veteran guys, because you don't want to wait till year 3 when these guys break out. Houston's looking at it a different way. We've got 32 teams conducting 32 different ways of business, right? And I think Houston's like, hey, we're gonna get cheaper and younger here, and I wish them all the luck doing that. I will throw an honorable mention to Christian Kirk. I thought that was a good ad. Right? He's gonna get cut, throw a 6th-round pick, it's fine. And now you have some flexibility because Tank Dell, it's just hard to get a gauge on what he's going to be post a second knee injury. He's also been shot in the last year and a half. So a lot that's going on for a great football player. But with Diggs gone, there's question marks about what he could be. I do think Christian Kirk's like a solid. You're not going to lose a whole lot there with bringing him in. and he can be a serviceable starter for you. To the Indianapolis Colts, most impactful signing. I do want to shout out Daniel Jones. I don't think they were going to draft a guy anyways, but I'll ask you here in a second, Cody. But do we think we see Daniel Jones by week 8? That's kind of the mark I've been kind of putting with people. By week 8, who's starting for this team? I feel like it's got to go Charvarius Ward and Cam Bynum, those secondary upgrades. This has been a team where like Malachi Starks, that's been a hot pick for me in some mocks. Jahdae Barron, if he gets there, I feel like he would be a total Lou Anarumo, scheme versatile, play him in the nickel, use him as like a Mike Hilton type. That could be fun there. But I think they've done enough there to where they don't have to force a secondary pick. And instead, they can kind of just evaluate this best player available. So I'll go with those two defensive backs, Cam Bynum, Charvarius Ward. What say you, Cody? And then also give me an answer here. Is it Anthony Richardson's job all next year? Or what do you think this ultimately plays out with Daniel Jones coming in there in Indy?
Yeah, putting week 8 on that number feels a little bit Anthony Richardson believable, but like you're riding the Anthony Richardson train. I know he's working out. I think I would put that number at like week 2.5. And that's not really even driven. This is all respect, man. I love Anthony Richardson. I think he's got incredible abilities. But it has everything to do with Anthony Richardson's health. 2, Anthony Richardson's growth. 3, Chris Ballard's seat is already got a propane tank beneath it, and it's got a torch on the propane tank, waiting for that thing to just explode. This whole situation feels like it's ready to explode, and if they push it with Anthony Richardson, and it's like 1-2, 1-3, 1-4, 2-4, 2-5, and it gets that's when things go fired, right? So I think they'll be able to see what he is in the first couple of weeks. And Daniel Jones, I can't remember who I was listening to. I listened to too many people, but they're saying the thing about the Daniel Jones addition is that he can play competent football. Purely that. He can play competent football, which we don't know Anthony Richardson can do right now in the NFL. That's the biggest takeaway I had was he can play competent football. He also was just in Minnesota learning from Sam Darnold and Kevin O'Connell for the last couple of months. And we also just heard Sam Darnold. I know this is kind of going backwards a couple of times, but we just heard Sam Darnold yesterday or today in his Seattle press conference talking about what it meant to work with Brock Purdy in San Francisco the year before he broke out this year, right? Yeah. So what does that mean? Does Daniel Jones learn anything like Darnold did with Brock Purdy? Did Jones learn enough from Darnold to kind of allow himself to take a step forward in this Colts offense? Because if Daniel Jones takes a step forward, he's going to still be 2 steps ahead of Anthony Richardson if Anthony Richardson takes 3 steps forward. I hope that makes sense, and I wholeheartedly believe that, and it's not a big not a lot of people like to hear that when it comes to Daniel Jones. As far as this conversation with their free agents, I love Cam Bynum, loved him in Minnesota. Charvarius Ward kind of hit his apex, and he feels like he's coming back down to earth a little bit, but I like the addition here for the Colts. We've seen the Colts, go after these aging corners at times before. Xavier Rhodes was one that they did 5-6 years ago, and he had a good season. Then he got hurt, and it kind of petered out from there. But going corner, going safety, I think opens the door to continue to kind of build trenches. They lose Will Fries. They lose Ryan Kelly. They need to go interior offensive line, interior defensive line, edge. Everyone always wants to go tight end to the Colts. And then the last thing I'll just throw in here is they did add Khalil Herbert. And
good sign. I like that.
Long-winded answer here, but they add Khalil Herbert for 1 year. What I've been trying to do with this rookie running back class, because everybody knows how deep it is trying to find spots in the NFL where there's meat shields built in. And a meat shield being, you have Jonathan Taylor there. And for fantasy football purposes, you're thinking, well, Jonathan Taylor, right? He's going to be a top 5-6 back. But what if they draft a running back in the first 3 rounds? What does that do to him? Well, here's the thing. When you got a meat shield like a Khalil Herbert, who's a competent back, you're not going to draft one in the first 3-4 rounds. So you can start looking down the line. They also have a Tyler Goodson, things like this. This is what I believe in, when I think of Tyler Algier, when you think of these different areas, even Philadelphia, they go get A.J. Dillon. They already have Will Shipley. So this is kind of where my brain goes, even though the Khalil Herbert thing seems lame and it's nobody talking about it, but I just think it's interesting from that perspective.
I've also been a big Khalil Herbert fan, so I'm kind of waiting for him to hit his breakout shot, but I don't foresee that being Indiana.
I don't know if that's going to quite happen.
Yeah. I don't think so either at this point. What is interesting, you talk about, and Jim, you ever watch Breaking Bad?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. It's almost like it feels like Jim Irsay's like I think beginning of season 2. Walt's talking to Tuco and he gets the fake product and he throws it off the ground and creates the big explosion. It feels like Jim Irsay's like waiting to see what happens with Anthony Richardson, Daniel Jones this year, and if they both suck, he's throwing it down and blowing up the building. So yeah, I'm
Pat McAfee, the new GM.
Yeah. Dude, yeah. I'm not ruling that out. Like, dude, if Jeff Saturday can become your interim head coach, don't rule it out. Jacksonville Jaguars. Cody, I toss it to you. What is the most impactful signing made by the Jags that affects the 2025 draft?
The most impactful signing by the Jacksonville Jaguars this offseason. You know what? It's James Gladstone.
Okay. Yeah. Facts. 100%.
That's what it is. I mean, the moves he's made, clearing guys out, bringing guys in. My guy Hacker from Jacksonville 1010XL, the radio station down there, had a good bit the other night talking about Cooper Kupp. Everyone's like, well, Cooper Kupp, Gladstone's got this connection to Cooper Kupp because he was just with the Rams.
Right.
And he goes, yeah, but guess what? Guess who knows more about Cooper Kupp than anybody in Jacksonville right now?
Yeah,
Gladstone does. And so he knows if he doesn't go after him, you probably don't want to go after Cooper Kupp. So I think he's attacking this the right way. The way that he talked about building the roster and also the way that we watched the Rams build their roster these last couple of years with Braden Fisk and Byron Young and Jared Verse, and you can go on and on, now signing Poona Ford, the emphasis on the trenches. And I think he's going to have an emphasis on the trenches, which is where, surprisingly, Balky and Doug Peterson failed. It was to emphasize the interior offensive line and defensive line. And I think that Gladstone's going to have that emphasis there. And what he did here this offseason so far, signing Patrick McCarry, Robert Hainsey to bring on that interior. And then I think he's got that 5th overall pick, man. They had not touched a defensive lineman yet. And I think that that's going to be exactly where they go.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Gladstone. I'm every answer he gives and I see on X, I'm like more fired up for the kid. And I mean, I say kid, but like he legitimately almost kind of feels like a kid. And then you shouted out McCarry and Hainsey, 2 flexible, versatile guys. McCarry can play any of those 5 spots. Hainsey's probably a better center than he is a guard, but he could do that in a pinch. So I think that kind of takes Will Campbell probably out of the equation there. Thought that was worthwhile conversation about a few weeks ago. You can put it damn near put it in pen. It's going to be Mason Graham at 5. If Mason Graham gets past New England at 4, he will be a Jacksonville Jaguar. That is the guy right there for the Jags. So I think that's a good shout too. They just haven't touched D-line yet. And I think this is a good draft to do that for, right? Like, go get those young guys out there. And they already have some good players too. I don't want to like discredit Josh Hines Allen and co. But yeah, I think Mason Graham is going to be the pick there at 5 if available. To the Kansas City Chiefs. What signing most impacts a draft? I mean, bringing back Trey Smith, is huge. Bringing back Nick Bolton, I think, is big. Marquise Brown. It sounds like Xavier Worthy is going to be clear of some of those charges, but I'm not a lawyer, so I don't want to speak too soon on that. I feel like it's got to be Jalen Moore. $15 million a year is not bad, but it's just going to be a question of what's the ceiling with Jalen Moore. He was okay filling in for Trent Williams last year, but what else is there? But I can also appreciate where they're coming from, where it didn't work out with Lucas Niang. It hasn't worked out with Wanya Morris, Kingsley Suamataia. It hasn't worked out so far. So I can appreciate them just going, hey, this rookie and drafting and developing guys, it's just not working for us. Let's go get a guy who's stable. Because I think that it's kind of amazing the correlation between like bad left tackle play and what happens to Patrick Mahomes. So I think they're kind of just setting a floor there with the Jalen Moore signing. What say you, Cody?
100%. I agree with Jalen Moore. And it's because like that's the one spot everybody's pretty clear. Like the Kansas City Chiefs need offensive line. They need tackle help. And I don't think it rules out them taking a tackle at 31. But I think it gives them a little more like ease of mind in saying, all right, well, we got this guy that we believe can play football, and we don't have to press. We don't have to like trade up in the draft. We don't have to be aggressive going after a tackle. So I think it gives them just a little peace of mind. Everything else they've done has been pretty requisite, like re-signing the guys they need to re-sign. Hollywood Brown, obviously, with the Worthy stuff, and Nick Bolton. I love Nick Bolton. So there's that. Losing Joe Thuney, I'll be interested to see kind of what that has. Maybe I was going to say maybe more for the Bears, but I kind of say both ways. I want to see how good he is for the Bears and maybe how much they miss him in Kansas City if they have to end up playing like Suamataia at guard or something.
Yeah, and that's been kind of the prevailing theory that Suamataia is going to move inside. But when Thuney moved to left tackle, left guard all of a sudden became a glaring weakness on the Chiefs O-line. So I think that's a great point to bring out as well. In the absence of Joe Thuney, what happened? Sure, you might be feeling better at left tackle, but what about that left guard spot? Cody, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to pay some bills. We're going to say thank you to a finalist, today's sponsor.
Life's a grind, and it feels like every minute counts between work, personal commitments, and trying to stay on top of your fantasy squad. That can be a lot. That's why we're excited to tell you about Finalist, the app that's built to help you prioritize and optimize your day-to-day tasks. It helps you plan everything from work projects to personal errands and prospect draft analysis. Finalist helps you get more out of your day by breaking tasks down into manageable steps so you can stay organized and never miss a deadline, whether it's for work or for fantasy football. So, if you want to crush your to-do list and stay on top of your fantasy squad, head over to finalist.works today and use code BEAT50 to get an exclusive discount on their premium plan. Start organizing your day like a pro and watch your life level up. That's code BEAT50, BEAT 50 at finalist.works today.
All right, consider those bills paid. Also want to shout out Best Ball on Call. Appreciate all the love and support here. Drop those comments in the YouTube chat and as well as on X. We're going to try to answer as many of those as possible. But moving on here, talking most impactful moves through free agency, how they changed the 2025 draft. We get to the Vegas Raiders. Oh, man. This is it's got to be Geno Smith. But I also want to shout out, like Alex Campa. I think that's a rock solid guy to bring into a mix of Jax Powers Johnson, Michael Parham, Dylan Parham, getting my sports mixed up. But they already have a pretty stable offensive line. Campbell's a nice add there for $5.5 million annually. Eric Stokes kind of buy low for a secondary that it's bad. They just got to overhaul. They got to get new guys in there. It's kind of like the Texans' offensive line. I don't know if this makes them better, but it's new guys, new blood, and that's worth at least taking a shot on. But it's got to be Geno Smith. Cody, what say you?
I would say the same thing. Like, I think it's Geno Smith. That's like the layup answer, right? Because I think 3 weeks ago, everyone's like, all right, man, well, are they going to make a move and potentially get a Shador? Or is this, is Jackson Dart going to be a top 10 pick because these guys need quarterbacks? Like, what's going to happen here? And they make the move for Geno. Massive. That's the move of the offseason, I think, pairing him back up with Pete Carroll. Offensive line is, to me, the most interesting thing here. Like you brought up, they add Alex Kappa, who's good, but they cut Andre James. I don't pay attention I'll just put it this way. I don't watch every single game from every single team every single week, right? But I have a lot of different friends that do watch their favorite teams. And I get a text from a guy. This is how I take this. If I get a text from somebody that I know watches the team every single week and they go, "Why the hell did we cut Andre James?" I go, "Well, you tell me why they cut Andre James. You like him. Why'd they cut him? Because they still look like they need guard help, right? They still look like they need offensive line help. You could still plug in. I mean, I could tell you to replace DJ Glaze at right tackle right now. Like, this is offensive line. They haven't done enough at the offensive line position. I know they went out and got Kappa, but they just have not done enough yet to accomplish what they need to protect Geno. Add another weapon outside. They haven't done that yet. So there's a couple things I think they haven't done on the side of making the Geno Smith move.
Well, it's funny, and I was going to bring up the Andre James thing, so I'm glad you brought it up as well. This is going to sound crazy, but the two highest grades I've given to a college prospect at center are Tyler Linderbaum and Jackson Powers Johnson. So I think getting rid of James, which, good football player. It's taken him some time, but he's become a really solid, dependable starter. So someone's going to go out there and get a solid bargain for Andre James. But now you move JPJ over, Parham at one spot, Cap at the other. The downside is you're getting a little older there with Kappa. But, it's going to be interesting how that plays out. I agree. Delmar Glaze was solid last year, but with these moves, they could go corner, they could go GT, but also don't rule out Armand Membu, depending on how you feel about Delmar Glaze. I think that could be an interesting add there. And it's just like a safe, easy pick there for, Pete Carroll. We're going to establish the run, that sort of stuff. But I'm interested to see Chip Kelly plus Geno Smith. That's going to be a really fun one, too. I can't wait to see how he fits into that offense. But now we're on to the Los Angeles Chargers. Cody, take it away. What is the most impactful signing? What move here changes the draft the most for the Chargers?
Najee. Like, that's my answer here, because I, like a lot of people, were kind of looking at the Chargers and just going, all right, is it going to be Omari and Hampton?
Yeah, right.
Or are we going round, is it going to be round 2? Are we going to get maybe a Caleb Johnson? Like, which one of these backs is going to land with the Chargers? And them taking Najee, to me, is a weave. Like, they're just like, nope, let's kick this thing down. I mean, proper, right? If I'm Harbaugh, I'm not taking it's not proper. Like, I know the running back position has gotten like a value bump in the eyes of everybody the last year. But in reality, especially with the depth of this class, everyone's like, oh, well, what if we get 3 running backs, or what if we get 4 running backs for the first time since 2008? I'm like, well, what if we don't? Because there's 25 guys that can play football. Right. And if you have logic in your team building, you'll kick the can to the 4th round and you'll take a Donovan Edwards or a Montrell Johnson or a Raheem Sanders. Right. Like, you'll take a guy like this that can play football. And I think that's exactly what Harbaugh is going to do. So Najee Harris is my biggest takeaway.
Yeah, no, I agree. And you look at Greg Roman and where he's been, and Jim Harbaugh too. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when was the last, and trust me, I was the guy pounding the table, please make it Amari Hampton there at 22.
Yeah.
When was the last major running back investment they made? Even last year, you bring in J.K. Dobbins and then you draft Kamani Vidal in the 6th. Najee Harris for 1-year deal. They have typically not been, as much as you think about the run game and that identity, it hasn't been a position where they're like, put a significant amount of eggs in this basket. They kind of play it Moneyball style there. And I might be forgetting someone, like Ray Rice. I can't remember if he was there with overlap with Greg Roman in Baltimore, but even that wasn't a first-round pick. It's just someone that they eventually gave some money to. So I agree. This is kind of their way. And really bringing back Khalil Mack, Tuli Tuipulotu, I also think that kind of gives them some stability. They don't have to go edge here, but I wouldn't hate if they drafted a guy and developed a dude over, you take him in day 2 somewhere. Maybe it's a Josiah Stewart with the Michigan connection. It could be something like that. And he's just kind of a DPR off rip. But I also want to shout out Poona Ford being gone. I do wonder if Kenneth Grant gets here. Again, a little lazy here. We're going Michigan to Michigan, but whether it's him or it's a Walter Nolan or one of these other defensive interiors, I do wonder if they start to look that direction as well, just given the loss of Poona Ford and how solid and stable he is against the run. So wanted to shout that out as well. Also glad they extended Elijah Molden. I think it's a good football player. Bradley Bozeman, some scheme familiarity with Greg Roman as well, too. So some solid moves, but yeah, Najee. It's hard not to get excited about that pick or that signing. To the Los Angeles Rams, Cody, what say you? What's the most impactful move made by the Rams so far?
It's hard not to like the Devontae Adams move. The some might call it lateral move. I think it's a great move, moving from Kupp to Adams at receiver. I'm going to go Poona Ford, though. 3 years, $30 million. This guy's going to be playing year 8, 9, 10 for the Rams. And when you look at this Rams defensive line, who I talked about it earlier, what they've been able to do with Fisk and Byron Young, Jared Verse, Kobe Turner, you add Poona Ford into this mix. Like, this is pretty confidently, I could say, unless something's coming to my mind, the best defensive line in football for the next 5 years. And Poona Ford, who we just heard Jason Kelce on a podcast say, Jason Kelce, the great center for the Eagles, said, the guy that always gave me the most fits, Poona Ford.
Yep.
Like, is not the one, he goes, yeah, Aaron Donald was like the best player I ever played against, but the one that gave me the biggest fits because he was short and he had long arms was Poona Ford. And what we know about Poona Ford, he's a great run defender. And then we know that they got guys that can rush the passer in Fisk and in Verse. So I love the Poona Ford addition for this Ram team that, at one point felt like they pushed the chips all in.
Right.
And then they were going to take a couple steps back. They sort of took like a half of a year back. And now they feel like this defense is in the spot where it's going to be the strength of the team in Stafford's latter years.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And we were just talking about Poona Ford. He's just one of these underrated guys that he only serves a specific role, but he does it at such a high level that it's hard to ignore that. And he's worth $10 million a year because of that. Devontae Adams is definitely the sexy one. I'll throw out Alaric Jackson too. $19 million a year is not too bad for this tackle market. Good up and coming player. And it's just one of these things where if you're going to move on from Jonah Jackson and create a starting hole on that offensive line, I'd really rather it not be 2. Let's just replace Jonah Jackson. Let's not have to replace 2 to 3 starters there. And they're already kind of creeping towards can we find a long-term replacement to Rob Havenstein too? So I can appreciate them bringing back Alaric Jackson and kind of limiting the amount of positions and the amount of assets they have to pour into that offensive line. So I wanted to shout that out as well. Miami Dolphins, most impactful signing. I'll go with James Daniels. I feel like James Daniels has signed this 3-year, $24 million deal 4 times in his career already. That's the exact same, year to money value he got from Pittsburgh, and just feels like, Levante David, 1 year, $10 million. James Daniels, 3 years for 24. It's just, you can count on it. It's an annual tradition, it feels like. But he's just a great scheme fit, and if he's healthy, he's a really good add for that interior offensive line that needed some overhaul big time. He also comes with some center flexibility, but primarily played guard. But I think he's a fantastic fit there for Miami. Cody, what's the most impactful move made by Miami so far?
I think the Zach Wilson thing's interesting. I don't know if it's the most impactful. I don't know if any of these are overly too overly impactful. I think James Daniels is a great move because they need offensive linemen. I think Zach Wilson's interesting, though. I think them going after a guy that has traits and spent the year next to Bo Nix and saw him progress, spent a year in that Sean Payton offense, learning, hopefully. And now he goes over to play with McDaniel behind Tua, who, you just never know with the health of Tua on a week-to-week basis. I think Zach Wilson's a guy that can play football. And the reason I bring this up is because I'm galaxy braining or visualizing down the road him potentially, being in a spot where he has to start and having weaponry around him like Tyreek and Jalen Waddle and Jonnu Smith and Devon Achane. And all of a sudden you're like, hey, man, this guy could maybe be successful. So Tua is the only quarterback on the roster. They needed to get somebody. This draft class doesn't have much. And Zach Wilson, I'm going to be interested most to see among the quarterbacks if he maybe takes a step forward.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the coaching he's had throughout his career up until Sean Payton. He always felt like a guy who was like just a little late making reads, and I just don't think the Jets ever had the guy, the quarterback whisperer, so to speak, to be able to get that progress, get him to work a little bit quicker. If there's someone to speed up your processing time and decision making, Sean Payton's had a lot of success doing that with guys. So I'd be very curious if he was able to do that. Also, like you said, if Tua gets hurt, like God forbid, like this offense really hit a rut last year without him on the field. So it'd be interesting to see if like Mike McDaniel, who's a much better schematic mind than, someone like Nathaniel Hackett, could he get those, fixes and tweaks made to Zach Wilson? And then what does he look like with Jalen Waddle and, a Tyreek Hill on that offense? I'll be boring and shout out Nick Westbrook-Akine here. He's just a good blocker. So I'm kind of interested with the wide zone stuff, running his side, the screen game too, what he kind of brings to that offense there. So it's not sexy, but it's kind of one of those things where the more you watch on tape, it's like, oh, that guy does things good. Like this guy's not so bad. And he'll score touchdowns potentially 8 weeks in a row. So who knows? All right. Minnesota Vikings. Cody, what are the moves here from the Vikes that most impact the 2025 draft?
I'll go Fries, Will Fries. I think Will Fries and Jonathan Allen. The cornerback and defensive line were the first two things that I have circled for like doing mocks. You're like, what is the biggest team need here for the Vikings? Defensive line, cornerback. They go get Isaiah Rodgers, which I think is a sleeper addition. They re-signed Byron Murphy. Great. But you need trench work. I feel like I've talked about trenches for like 6 teams now. But Jonathan Allen, he gets cut by the Commanders. He goes to the Vikings. Will Fries from Indianapolis gets one of the biggest contracts this entire cycle, 5 years, $88 million on a total number, $88 million. Will Fries goes in there, and the Vikings was just needed. They just need that interior, that right tackle, that right guard, left guard, center. They need to mix that thing up because it's been messy the last couple of years. And I think Will Fries allows them to have versatility. They're missing a second round pick, so they pick at like 24, and then not again until pick number, where did it go? 97. So not good. One pick in the top 96. So I like pretty much everything the Vikings have done. I've liked, from Javon Hargrave to Kelly to Allen to everything.
Yeah, no, I think what they've done is kind of patched up. Like the trench play just had to get better, specifically on the interior offensive line, interior defensive line. They just had to get better there. And Hargrave, Fries, both coming off injuries, had ended their season early. So no guarantee they're going to fix everything or that they can totally stay healthy. But at their best, those are serviceable additions to what they've done. And plus, Ryan Kelly, Jonathan Allen, I'm really excited about what those all look like for their respective sides of the ball. Corner, I still think it's in play here. They're at that spot where if they don't move back, corner value starts to get a little bit better to me. You bring back Byron Murphy, that's a lot of money for me with Byron Murphy Jr. But Isaiah Rodgers is also a serviceable player. But I think you hit the nail on the head. They kind of ate their vegetables here. They made it to where their roster, they could go play a game tomorrow if they needed to and be okay with it. They're going to trade back from 24. I don't know with who and why that team is moving up. Maybe it's an offensive tackle of some sort with Kansas City maybe or something like that. Who's to say? But I think this team's now in a spot where they're trying to trade out of the first round, recoup some of those assets, grab a running back maybe with some of those picks they gained in that trade back. And these moves make that a lot more easy and a lot more tenable, I think. So then on to the New England Patriots. Man, I feel like I kind of have to go Milton Williams with most impactful move. I do think there was a possibility of Mason Graham being the pick there at 4. Milton Williams probably takes that out of the cards. Never say never, though. Christian Barmer's a good football player when he's out there. Carlton Davis is another one where it's like, depending on how you feel about Travis Hunter, can you draft Travis Hunter if you see him as a full-time corner? I don't know. Never say never. He's a good football player, and he does come with two-way potential. But Carlton Davis and Christian Gonzalez, that's a pretty serviceable duo. I don't know if you need to do a whole lot of changing there. So I'll go with Milton Williams, honorable mention to Carlton Davis. But Cody, what say you? What changes the draft the most here for the Patriots?
What changes the draft most for me is what they did, and it's pretty apparent, right? We know they have Christian Gonzalez. They add Carlton Davis. They give him a healthy contract. I expect Carlton Davis to come in and compete and start. So that gives you two cornerbacks. You're probably thinking, all right, well, that means Travis Hunter's probably not going to be, I think he's a better cornerback than he is a receiver, but I think he's a first round top 10 receiver as well. Yeah, exactly. So I think it takes Travis a little bit out of the conversation. You take Milton Williams, you pay him. I think that takes Mason Graham out of the conversation. You sign Morgan Moses to right tackle. And then Elliot Wolf is asked about it and he goes, he's played right tackle. He'll play right tackle. He is a right tackle. We're going to play him at right tackle. And I go, well, yeah, but what about left tackle? So I think left tackle, based on the moves they've made, wide open, and then receiver, right? And I'll be interested to see how the course of the next 6 weeks go when people are asked in that market about Travis Hunter and about the tackle position, because Membu, to me, Armin Membu from Missouri is purely a right tackle, or could play right guard if you really wanted to. I think he play right tackle. When you think of the left tackles, it's to me, it's Banks and then Campbell, and Campbell's got two short arms, in my opinion, to be a top 5 pick. So it's Banks, and nobody believes Banks is a top 5 pick right now for some reason, even though he's been there the last 3 years in conversations. So for me, the big takeaway is Milton kind of acts as, like you said, out Graham. I think Carlton Davis kind of to a certain extent takes out Travis Hunter from this conversation. And at right tackle with Morgan Moses, it opens the door for left tackle. So I think that the Patriots are sort of showing their hand. But then when they show us their hand, then they go a completely different direction. That's usually how the NFL works. So
then they draft Cole Strange at 4 overall. No,
yeah, and you're like, what the hell? That's a 4th round pick.
And it comes down to really how they feel about Ted McMillan. I wouldn't rule that out. Something tells me here they're going to stick at 4 until draft night. And if Carter's gone, like if we have a world where, I mean, this would take a lot of things going the right way, but Giants trade up to 1, Cam Ward's the pick. Browns decide, you know what, we need a quarterback. They take Shadur at 2. Titans say, you know what, Travis Hunter's that generational guy we were talking about. In that one specific scenario, I think the Patriots are sprinting the card in for Abdul Carter. Otherwise, I think they're going to try to trade back and leverage the hype around Travis Hunter.
Yes.
I think that's going to be ultimately the move. Or you get into a tricky spot where only one of those quarterbacks gone in the top 3, Hunter and Carter are gone. And then again, how do you feel about Ted McMillan? How high is too high for Banks, Campbell, all that sort of stuff. So I do wonder if this is a trade down team in the right situation. But I think they'll stay at 4 just in the slim chance that Abdul Carter makes their way there. But I think we're in luck right here. So many of their moves, you kind of like, well, I thought they would draft that guy. Oh, well, maybe that guy. Oh, well, they kind of just crossed that out. So I'm very interested to see where this team goes. I do think trading back ultimately does make a lot of sense for them. New Orleans Saints. Cody, I toss it to you. What move here from the Saints catches your eye?
None of them. Because the Saints are, they re-signed Chase Young. Congratulations. You needed to not sign anybody. That's what you needed to do. You needed to get as many comp picks, let as many people walk. You needed to not sign people. I think they just needed to eat it, put the paper bags on their heads, enter the season, move on from Kamara, move on from Derek Carr, give Spencer Rattler the season. That's what I think that New Orleans should do, but no owner in the NFL is going to fully succumb to that. I don't think so. I'll just go with Justin Reed, the guy that got the most money. Justin Reed to play safety in the New Orleans, and they just need to continue to add pieces. Man, this whole team for some reason just became bewildered overall on talent. It feels like at certain spots, and they still have guys. They have first round picks like Kool-Aid McKinstry and stuff on the back end, but I'll go Justin Reed. It's boring. I don't like the Saints. I think they need to do a lot of different things that I disagree with, but there it is.
Well, Ian Rappaport out here tweeting Saints get their corner when they sign Isaac Yiadom. So, I mean, I feel like that's got to be the move here. No, I'm
get their three. I actually love that the term that these reporters use. They're like, they got their guy. They get their running back. It's like, Like, what do you think? They give him $3 million, man. You'd be lucky if this guy even makes it through camp. What are we doing here? Let's be honest with ourselves.
One of the main takeaways here is I've got to get an agent. No one will sell me harder because these agents they're doing the Lord's work. They are absolutely selling their clients. Devon Godshaw, I think is actually a serviceable as a defensive interior that could definitely get better. Chase Young, I think, there's still upside, there's still potential. It's a little bit of a defensive scheme twist here with Brandon Staley coming in. I do wonder how that impacts him. But I'll go, and this is kind of with a negative. Why did you bring back Juwan Johnson for 10.25 a year? Like, that's the one where I'm scratching and I'm like, Tyler Warren's probably going to be there at 9, right? Like, so I don't know. Now I'm kind of like, can you draft Tyler Warren at 9? I don't think you can now. So that's a lot of assets to dump into a tight end position. And who knows? I don't think Kellen Moore really uses tight ends that much in his offense. So would it be Tyler Warren in the first place? Why pay Juwan Johnson $10 million a year? So that's the one where I'm like, I don't know. That impacts the draft strategy for me with the New Orleans Saints there. And it's just a move that I'm like, he's fine. He's good. He's youngish. I don't know if I'm giving him $10 million a year, though. We get to the New York Giants. There's a couple different moves here that I think are really interesting. I'll be cheeky here and I'll go with 2. Paulson Adebo, Javon Holland. That secondary last year was abysmal. You let Xavier McKinney go to Green Bay. I get it. If you didn't feel like you could pay him, so be it. But you paid the consequences there. And Deonte Banks, just as much as I liked him as a first-round guy, it just hasn't come together just yet. And now Adoree Jackson's gone. You had to find an upgrade there. I think Paulson Adebo was a great fit for that scheme. And it's a younger guy too. So long-term, he kind of fits that potential winning window. I'll go with those 2 secondary guys, younger side, but definitely some upside plays there. Cody, what do you think?
I agree with you. So I'm not going to say anything. I agree with everything you just said. What I'm going to go with the direction of saying $12 million a year for Darius Slayton.
Yeah, man.
$12 million a year
for a guy
Darius
they never
Slayton
figured out how to use
is one of the, like, I got no words type of a situation. When you look at like all the other NFL contracts right now, he's the 26th highest paid wide receiver, which is more than what like Marvin Harrison Jr. is getting as a top 5 pick and a rookie contract, right. Which, is what it is because the CBA adjusted all that stuff. But $12 million per year. And this is on the heels of, I think the De'Ami Brown got $10 million. Like, I just don't get it. Right. I don't get the utilization of Darius Slayton. I don't get the allure of Darius Slayton. I think you could go to this draft and you can go to like the 5th round. And if you want somebody to just run some wind sprints for you, well, first off, you could go, sign Jalen Guyton off the free agency. Right. You can draft Tez Johnson. You can draft a Silas Bolden in the 7th round if you want somebody to run wind sprints and just run 4.25 down the sideline. What has Darius Slayton done to show you that can be a proper Z on the opposite side of Malik Neighbors? Like, that's where I think this is a complete failure. We're waiting to see what they do at quarterback. They haven't done anything yet. They're in the conversations, it sounds like, with Rodgers and Wilson. And I think they're going to move up and get Cam Ward, but that's
I'm with you there. Yeah, I think it's going to be a 3rd this year and a 3rd next year, potentially more. They're going to move up to number 1. Tennessee's only got 2 top 100 picks. Go out there and do yourself a favor. Get an extra 2nd, get an extra 3rd. That roster is not good enough as it is. Mm-hmm. So I think it'd be smart for both sides, really. And dude, like Brian Daboll, Joe Schoen, it's the worst kept secret in the entire NFL landscape. They're there to go get a quarterback. Like, that's the only reason they're still there. So I'm with you wholeheartedly. And it'd be one thing if like Darius Slayton, they got a new head coach, right? And okay, well, Slayton's worked with this guy. We've seen him in that exact same jersey, and it not work. I'm just left wondering like what's going on here. To the New York Jets, what to you is the most impactful signing here for the Jets?
Well, the quarterback situation is definitely interesting. I'll just put it that way. The Justin Fields signing, I know it's not that ton of money. It's not like he got $30 million a year. But it's interesting because it seems like they're definitely going to give him the keys. It takes, to me, them out of the conversation for a quarterback in the first 2 rounds, which I was thinking maybe they do something in round 1. There's potential for them to move up. Round 2 for sure, if a dart falls or maybe the Shook thing gets into the Jets and they move up. But going after a quarterback like Justin Fields, who we know is run-centric, makes it more interesting. If I don't know where Milroe's going to go, man. The Milroe thing's a wild card. If Milroe hypothetically was there in like the late 2nd or the early 3rd, which I don't think he will be after he runs a 4.4 at the pro day, right, you add Milroe to that, I think it becomes like hey, we're building this team different than what it has been these last couple of years with Rodgers, right? In which it's incompetent passing. It's going to be more incompetent passing, but at least going to have this rushing threat, and we're going to build it different. I think that's the big takeaway I got from the Justin Fields edition. I don't think that they'll use a first 2-round pick on a quarterback, which is what I was looking at.
Yeah, and I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a Steelers fan. Fields was like, if we're going to go out there and do something in free agency, let's hopefully bring him back. So that's unfortunate from my side, but it is kind of interesting. I was talking about this in a mock the other day, because even the Steelers gave up on him after 6 games, and there was so much pressure on him in Chicago. I almost wonder if Aaron Glenn is like the perfect like catalyst of confidence for Justin Fields, because the main thing with me is like he can see something open, he just has a little bit of reluctance to pull the trigger and make that throw. And I feel like that's just a confidence thing. He's just not trusting himself as a pro. And I almost wonder if like Aaron Glenn's the guy to install that confidence in him. So I do wonder where this kind of goes. I also want to shout out Andre Cisco here. $10 million feels pretty rich. But, kind of like the Marcus Davenport thing, I think they're both doing themselves favor just signing these 1-year mercenary deals. Because Cisco's going to have a year like Geno Stone did a couple years ago, get 6 picks because he's got ball hawk skills. And then someone the next year is going to be like, hey, dude, let's give this guy $15 million. He's in his mid-20s and he's peaking. Let's go give him the bag. And it feels like Davenport's like 1 10-sack a year away from like a team being like, all right, Chase Young contract or more, let's go get him a guy. So I just want to plot that out. I think that's just a great career arc there for Andre Cisco. He hasn't panned out, but I think he's playing his contract cards the right way, simply put. All right, Philadelphia Eagles, the next one up here. Re-signing Zach Bond's kind of the first thing that comes to my mind. Of the guys they could keep, that to me was, and I'm not normally like prioritize the off-ball linebacker guy, but for whatever reason, I kind of felt like that's the guy I would probably most prioritize. I also think it's kind of interesting, the overhaul here in the secondary for what was one of the best defenses, maybe the best defense in football last year. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, I think you've kind of got that taken care of with, Cooper DeJean playing that slot. And then Slay and Bradbury are getting up there in age. So it makes sense to move on from those guys. But it's just interesting to see right after you won a Super Bowl with one of the best defenses in football. But I think they'll be able to backfill that. But those are some of the moves that most stand out to me. Maybe, Philadelphia picking a corner there at 32 is live. But they do still obviously have Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean. So maybe they're good there. I also do think if there's a place to rehabilitate Kenyon Green, it's Jeff Stoutland University. So not a whole lot to really talk about here with the Eagles, but just a couple of departures that kind of catch my eye. What do you think, Cody?
Just that. And I was just going to add in the Kenyon Green thing. I think you nailed that right in the head. Worked for Mekhi Becton. Maybe we can pull something out of the former first-round pick in Kenyon Green, who had a lot of upside. And then Adoree Jackson. They added him the last couple of days, which I know he hasn't had the good last couple of years. He hasn't really done anything. But he was a former Thorpe Award winner. You put him in this defensive backfield where he doesn't really have to be a focus at any point. And it kind of gives you just a little bit of insurance so you don't have to be hyper aggressive after that cornerback in the draft, even though I think they will probably be rather aggressive.
I also think Josh Uche is a good ad. Like, he's historically been a good DPR. He just did nothing for Kansas City for whatever reason. Something tells me, Philadelphia, they're going to be able to get him back on track. And he's going to be a guy that hits the market next free agency and could potentially make himself a lot of money. To my Pittsburgh Steelers, if you don't mind, I'll go again here. It's kind of got to be DK Metcalf, because I think it's twofold. One, Darius Slay, I think that's like a better version of the Patrick Peterson like trial run, where it's like this guy's getting up there in age, but I think Slay's got more to offer at this point than Pat Pete did when we brought him in. But it's DK Metcalf, and now the question is, can you have an offense with him and Pickens in it? I don't know if you could have found 2 receivers with more similar skill sets across the entire NFL, other than like some white slot receivers, maybe, like something like that. So I'm starting to wonder, like, is Pickens on his way out? I'm very curious. I have no like intel, no potential lean right now, but I wonder if it's Pickens' 3rd-round pick to New England or to the Chargers or something like that, because I just don't see a world where you coexist with both those guys. And it's also an offense where Arthur Smith doesn't use a lot of 3-receiver sets. So if they keep Pickens, for the majority of the time, it's going to be Metcalf and Pickens out there. So I'm very curious where this goes. But Cody, what do you say for the Pittsburgh Steelers? Most impactful move?
The Metcalf number change was interesting to me. It just happened, I think, yesterday. And I was like, I definitely thought Pickens was on his way out. I mean, he's in a contract year this next year, so he's going to probably want something before this year begins, which is going to be, hairy and fun to listen people complain about in the fall. I love the idea of both of these guys being in the same offense, but they're both just maniacal, so I don't know if it'll work. I want to ask you a question, though, just to intermediate this one sec, is Aaron Rodgers. Do you would you, as you say you're a Steelers fan, would you rather go get Rodgers, or would you rather just say, let's run it back with Russ one more year?
Well, so that's what's interesting. So one, also like DK and his wife were set up by Russ and Sierra. So, not that that's the telltale sign or anything like that. But some of that kind of leads me to believe, like, you know what? And with how these guys play, they fit with more of the moonball Russ stuff. The problem is, dude, like week 11 on, because I was just listening to something the other day where, big time throw rate and turnover worthy play rate, PFF stats, Russ had better numbers in both those categories than Rodgers. But I think week 11 on, Pittsburgh started seeing nothing but too high shells. And it started with that first Ravens game. We're going to play too high and we're not going to let you complete the moon balls. And if you keep Pickens and Metcalf, like, why wouldn't you run too high shells against this offense if it's Russell Wilson? That's exactly what they want to do. They're letting you know. And I just don't know if Pittsburgh can consistently run teams out of too high shells. So that's my hesitancy with Russ. And that's kind of where I just lean into Aaron Rodgers. That being said, there is some hesitancy with me saying that because if we bring in Rodgers, is it same old Aaron Rodgers kind of, being the LeBron of the NFL, like playing GM? He's going to make a case for Randall Cobb. And so, like, what are we doing here? How much control, how much say is he having? So I think I lean Rodgers right now, to be honest with you. I think he's a little bit better than Russ, but that's also because I just saw the second half of last year and Russ gets shut down by too high shells. So like now I have like no hope that if a team runs that coverage, then I feel like we're toast. So I'm kind of leaning Rodgers, but again, Fields would have been the most optimal guy to me. But I think in an ideal spot, it's tough without a second round pick. I'm a big Tyler Shuck guy. He's my QB3 this year. In a perfect world, it'd be Rodgers and Shuck. I think that would be my ideal combo right there. But, maybe it's Mason Rudolph and Tyler Shuck. Maybe that's the play. Maybe that's the future for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
I think they might lose some season ticket holders if it's Mason Rudolph.
They might lose a certain viewer every single week. That's for damn sure. All right, Cody, I'll toss it to you. San Francisco 49ers. What's the most impactful move and why is it Mac Jones?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you. They've lost so much, it feels like, this offseason so far. Yeah. And Mac is interesting. I was talking, I brought up Alex before. I have a show with Alex every single day on Roster Watch. And I asked him yesterday, I said, would it shock you at all if, week 12 rolls around and let's say a hypothetical injury happens again to a quarterback that is, in San Francisco, and Mac Jones starts playing well under Kyle Shanahan? Because it's not like we haven't seen Matt Ryan, Kirk Cousins. Everyone knows the list, right? Of all the success that these white pocket quarterbacks have had under Kyle Shanahan. Why not Mac Jones? Like, if he's got any of the swag back and he comes in there and he's just working behind Brock Purdy, minding his own business, continuing to grow. And if he picks up, we've heard how hard it is to pick up the Shanahan offense. If he just comes in, if he picks this thing up,
could be interesting.
Could be very interesting going forward, given the injury history of Brock Purdy. So I think that's a hammer. It's Mac Jones. Not even close.
Luke Farrell, why is this guy getting so much money? What is the 49ers fascination with getting backup tight ends? Also, I do want to shout out Demarcus Robinson. He's kind of turned into a really solid receiver. He's not going to like wow you or anything, but I think as a part of a wide receiver room, good guy to add into that mix. Seattle Seahawks.
Let me ask you one question about Demarcus Robinson.
Yeah, let me hear it.
I should have brought this up when I was talking a second ago, but Demarcus Robinson, 2 years, $9.5 million. Do you think that the addition of Demarcus Robinson allows the Niners to feel good going into a draft, potentially thinking about trading Brandon Ayuk?
I do think that. I've heard the trade rumors with him going to New England, which, I mean, dude, if it's a second round pick for that, it's kind of hard to resist for New England. And if you're San Francisco, hey, it's almost an extra first round pick. I do wonder if that's in play. And it felt like they drafted Pearsall last year to be a Brandon Ayuk replacement. Yeah. So do they already have that guy in the building? That's the other question. So I do think it adds some, but then you start looking at San Francisco and Brock Purdy and you're like, wow, you went from Debo, Kittle, and Ayuk to, Kittle, Jawan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall. Not that that's bad. It's just far less unproven. Yeah. And then maybe Savion Williams just for the vibes, right? Like if you're going to replace Debo, go get Savion, right? So I do think that does play a factor. But I do wonder what's going to happen there with Ayuk. I've heard the rumors, and I think New England,
I want
that. All right, Seattle Seahawks. It's got to be Sam Darnold. I think they got him at a solid contract point. Obviously familiar with Clint Kubiak. That was his OC in San Francisco. So I'm excited to see where this goes. Something tells me it's going to be not the Sam Darnold we saw at the beginning of the year or throughout most of last year, and it's not going to be the Sam Darnold we saw the last 2 weeks. It's going to be some guy there in the middle, some guy who plays QB 20 to 15 level. So it's really going to come down to the weight of the rest of that roster. Can you make do with an average quarterback? That's what it's going to come down to. DeMarcus Lawrence is also an interesting ad, fresh after, extending Leonard Williams last year. I am curious to see where this kind of edge group goes. But Cody, what about you? What do you think about the Seattle Seahawks?
You talked about the important ones. Sam Darnold, I think DeMarcus Lawrence is big. It's what they didn't do for me. They haven't done much on the offensive line. I know they bring in Josh Jones, who's going to be a depth piece, a swing tackle type. It leaves the interior still with need. And what most people viewed as one of the bottom 5 offensive lines in football last year now has a, rather solid paid veteran quarterback in Sam Darnold, who needs protection to not get rattled. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah. And
they haven't done much on the offensive line.
And we just saw the Vikings say, you know what, our interior offensive line failed our quarterback. Let's go overhaul that. And now he's stepping into a team with probably now comfortably the worst interior offensive line in the draft now, or in the league. That being said, like one more guard signing, I still have hope in Christian Haynes. And for a 6th rounder, I'm ready to see where Oluwatimi goes, but he is still a 6th-round center, so you don't have to stick with that either. So wouldn't shock me if this is the Gray Zabel team, especially if they move back, or even a guy like a Jared Wilson, maybe even in the 3rd round, right? Like I could see them double dipping at that spot just to get a couple guys that fit that offense. And to me, those are 2 good scheme fits. To the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I'll go with Hassan Reddick, most impactful signing, because I think they're going to probably still go edge at 19. Like I still fully believe that. But Reddick at least gives you a guy for that draft pick to play off of. Also, the Anthony Weaver deal, 1-year contract, Levante David 1-year deal. I almost do wonder if Jahad Campbell is almost even more solidified, maybe because of no real succession plan there at linebacker. So those are the couple of moves that kind of jump out to me. What about you, Cody?
I mean, they got Godwin on what's believed to be one of the better deals of the year. New England obviously was willing to give him the bag. They need an X receiver. Godwin, the one thing I will say about going to the Senior Bowl, the Shrine Bowl, the Combine, going to all these events is you hear a lot of stuff. And day one at the Senior Bowl, there was a lot of murmur that night about Godwin just being like, we asked people and they were like, is Godwin leaving or is he staying? And they were like, he ain't going anywhere. And we knew that. And this is a different level of he ain't going anywhere, of like taking a couple $1 million pay cut to stay in Tampa Bay, play with Baker Mayfield, play with Mike Evans, continue to build this thing up with Jalen McMillan. Like, I think that's a big power move. That's a big value move for Tampa Bay and allows them to continue to keep this thing together. So I love the Chris Godwin move here.
Yeah, and it probably hurts the chances of Luther Burden going somewhere in the 1st round, because that would have been one heck of a fit. All right, Tennessee Titans, moves that most impact the NFL draft. I'm going to toss it to you here, Cody. Start us off. What about the Titans most jumps out to you?
I mean, they continue to add offensive linemen, which they need to do. They obviously need to get a quarterback. The Cam Ward conversation is there. I don't know if they move off of that first pick, if the Giants go up and get him and get Cam, and if Shedeur hypothetically goes 2 to the Browns, I'm going to be interested to see kind of what the angle is here with Tennessee at quarterback. I thought for the longest time that Aaron Rodgers would have been fun there, but obviously I don't think he's going to do that because it's not a win-win. It's not a winning situation. Is there a world where they, entered the season with like Levis again as the thing here, and they go out and they add Dan Moore that we know can play football. He played for Pittsburgh for a couple of years, 4 years, $82 million he gets, and they continue to shore this thing up. They got Latham last year, Skoronski the year before, Dan Moore, Lloyd Cushenberry's good at center, and you can add in Kevin Zeitler, who's old as hell but can play good football. They're continuing to do the right things, make the right moves on the offensive line. So that's where I'm going to go with Tennessee.
Yeah, they're creeping that offensive line back towards average, which is huge. And I thought for the longest time, I was like, Callahan was his quarterback coach in Vegas. They're going to find a way to get Derek Carr. That's obviously not going to happen. Now the Saints are pretty much locked into that. So, yeah, I feel like it's the offensive line moves. Dan Moore and Kevin Zeitler. Not that I thought they were going to draft a guy at 3, but certainly at the top of the 2nd round, that could have been a position where, hey, maybe Ariante Ursary falls in our lap. We're going to do that, and that's what moves J.C. Latham over to the right side. But now Dan Moore's kind of taking that out of the equation. And now, and also the Harold Landry, release. He gets announced he's going to get released at the Combine, and everyone's like, all right, it's Abdul Carter. It's Abdul Carter. He's got to be the pick of 1. So, if it is quarterbacks 1 and 2, maybe that's just like a streamlined path towards Abdul Carter being the 3rd overall pick. Then we get to the Washington Commanders. Most impactful signing is Javon Kinlaw. No, that's one of the more head-scratching ones, but there's not a whole lot of minimums there, or not a whole lot of guarantees there for Javon Kinlaw. So not too worried about that. It's the 2 trades, man. Like for a team that's going to go all in and try to win this year, it's Laramie Tunsil Brandon Coleman's going to kick ass at guard. I'm so excited to see that. And then Deebo Samuel's a great complement to what they already have. He's a good fit for Cliff Kingsbury's offense too. But I also got to shout out like Dedrick Wise, I think is a solid football player. He's going to be, just a dependable guy for that defensive line. Jonathan Jones gives him a nice, solid outside corner option. Hopefully we can move Mikey Samerstill inside, even though he was great on the boundary last year. That's just my preference playing him in the slot. And then a bunch of great re-signings like Bobby Swag's back. Zach Ertz is serviceable. Noah Brown, I think, is an intriguing kind of big body guy for them. So this is another one of those teams where, like, if you're talking best all season so far, it's kind of hard not to throw the Commanders in that mix, but mostly because of those two trade pieces. Cody, what do you say?
Love the trades. I'm going to go Dedrick Wise and Jacob Martin here on the defensive line on the edge. I still think they need to go edge again, but I like the specialty players in Jacob Martin and Dedrick Wise that, like, last year they went out and, they drafted Jamin Davis a couple years before that, but they converted him to edge last year and it kind of flamed out. It looked nice in training camp when I was up there for a couple of days. And Clellan Ferrell didn't work out. Like, they're trying to fulfill needs on certain downs in this edge room. And I think adding a Jacob Martin and Dedrick Wise adds some more versatility to it. Now, on top of what they're still going to have to do in the draft, you talked about the trades. Laramie Tunsil kind of ties this offensive line a little bit closer together. And Deebo Samuel, I think, allows more flexibility in the draft to not have to attack that wide receiver number 2 spot in round 1. Gives you a little more versatility.
Yeah, and I mean, specifically, you look at the edge guys now on that roster with Wise and Martin. A lot of them are guys you can play on early downs. So with, Mike Green kind of falling down boards, the off the field stuff, or like James Pierce Jr. is not necessarily been for everyone. These guys where, at the next level, maybe you're not super confident they're going to be great against the run. Mike Green has shorter arms. Pierce is kind of a thinner build. I almost wonder if this makes it even easier for the Commanders to be like, hey, you let Mike Green fall into our lap? Sure, dude. We don't care if he can't play against the run with short arms. We got dudes for that. We're going to let him pin his ears back on 3rd and 10 and go make a play for us and end this drive. So I do wonder if that kind of frees them up to go get that guy where maybe the run game limitations are there, but they don't really care now at 29. So I also do wonder at corner, you bring in Jonathan Jones, but I do wonder still if like the right corner's there to partner up with Marshawn Lattimore. Could you do that? Like an Azareye'h Thomas, could you get another man coverage guy in that mix? I'd be very curious about that. But that does it. 32 teams, an impact move for all of them and how it impacts the 2025 NFL Draft. Cody, man, it's been great having you on. I really appreciate you taking the time. And God, we're coming past an hour and a half now. So I appreciate you carving out some time with us this afternoon. Where can the good people find your work?
Most definitely, TJ. I always appreciate it. You can find my work over at rosterwatch.com. My 4-round mock just dropped this morning. And then I have a daily show on YouTube. It's called The Draft Ranking Show every morning, less than 10 minutes, just a short, concise, something about the draft every morning, 7 o'clock in the morning. You can find that on podcast and YouTube. And I always thank you again. I appreciate it.
Oh, dude, of course. It's been great to have you on here, man. It's always been great to talk about free agency. Sometimes it's hard to find an outlet in a draft show to talk about free agency, but I think today we found the right avenue to where let's highlight some of this big news, but also how it impacts the main thing that we're covering here with the NFL Draft. So thanks again, man. I really appreciate you checking us out and coming on the show today, man. Awesome. Well, that is going to do it for us here. This is Beyond the Tape. Definitely give Cody a follow. Check out all his work. Give us a follow here on X as well as subscribe to us here on YouTube if that's where you're watching. But until next time, for 32 Beat Writers, he's Cody, I'm TJ, and we are signing off.